And if somebody said, you know, you're with a man because it's rich and famous, they don't know me.
Feel that in some way you helped make him president?
Absolutely. Because Donald would come on my show. I mean, look.
Does it make you feel bad or good?
Well, look, I did not vote for Donald Trump.
What started off feeling like an ordinary day quickly took a dramatic turn the moment Howard Stern picked up the microphone and began revisiting stories that many assumed would stay buried forever. Before long, Donald Trump found himself pulled into a growing storm, while Melania Trump appeared far from comfortable watching it unfold from the background. The tension escalated almost instantly, reactions intensified online, and the chaos that followed was something few people could have predicted.
You still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people...
Trashing Rosie was something you had in common with Donald Trump.
Yeah, well...
Okay, how many times did you have Donald Trump on?
Too many to count. Donald Trump appears 11 times in my book, and it's a fascinating little...
If you're enjoying the video so far, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because your support truly makes a difference. The second Howard Stern decided to reopen the vault of his old conversations with Donald Trump, things stopped feeling like harmless nostalgia and started resembling the uncovering of a forgotten chapter no one really wanted brought back, especially Melania Trump, who suddenly had to face a past that refused to stay hidden.
He was an open book. He would say anything. And, you know, oddly enough, during the campaign and even now, people quote these interviews that I did with him. Big time.
What makes this entire situation so captivating is not simply the fact that old interviews resurfaced, but the raw and completely unfiltered atmosphere surrounding them. These conversations came from a time when people spoke freely, without considering how heavily their words might echo years later. At that point in time, Trump was not presenting himself as a political figure carefully protecting a polished public image. Instead, he operated as a celebrity personality who approached interviews like entertainment arenas where limits barely existed and subtlety was never part of the strategy.
Have pushed false claims about some of your rivals, from Nikki Haley to former President Barack Obama, saying that they were not born in the United States, which is not true.
Trump would come on my show, and this is why he was great. There was no filter. I go, Donald, Angelina Jolie, she's one of the most beautiful actresses in the world. She's a 6, you know.
Stern thrived in that kind of environment because his entire reputation was built around pushing discussions into places most people would avoid completely. Trump stepped directly into those conversations with the confidence of someone convinced nothing would ever return to haunt him later. Stern did not simply interview Trump, he treated him almost like a recurring character in an ongoing series where every appearance needed to top the previous one. He constantly guided discussions into deeply personal territory, especially regarding Trump's relationship with Melania, asking questions that sounded less like genuine curiosity and more like tests to see how far Trump was willing to go publicly. Surprisingly, Trump rarely pushed back because he appeared to enjoy the attention that came from making statements capable of sending public relations teams into panic mode.
He was wild. I thought I was wild. He would come on. He would start assigning numbers to women and evaluating them. I'm like, is this guy for real? What is he doing?
Like rating them, 1 through 10.
1 through 10, I went, yes. Yeah. But I'm like...
This is where the situation shifts from mildly entertaining to deeply uncomfortable, because Stern never hid his aggressive approach when discussing women, and Trump seemed completely willing to participate. Conversations about beauty, attraction, and desirability became recurring themes, often framed in ways that reduced people to rankings and comparisons, almost like contestants in an endless competition judged from one narrow perspective. Stern encouraged the tone. Trump leaned into it, and together they created moments that once passed as outrageous entertainment, but now clashed directly with the expectations placed on a sitting president. Suddenly, what once felt like playful shock value transforms into something far more controversial. And right in the center of it stands Melania, watching discussions about her marriage become public spectacle all over again.
You know, most people, if they're having that thought, keep that pretty guarded. Not Donald. He was right into it. Ivanka Trump.
You know who's one of the great beauties of the world, according to everybody, and I helped create her? Who? Ivanka.
Meanwhile, Stern has openly referred to Trump as one of the most unforgettable guests he ever had, not because he was cautious or calculated, but because he was completely unpredictable. Trump seemed willing to answer nearly anything and appeared unconcerned with how his comments might eventually be perceived. That unpredictability made for compelling radio at the time, but it also created an enormous archive of material that now resurfaces with a very different impact. One of the most controversial elements of these interviews involves Trump's personal views, and the fact that some conversations included remarks involving members of his own family only adds another layer of disbelief. It crossed boundaries that most public figures would never even approach publicly. Now imagine all of those moments returning to the spotlight, while Melania is expected to remain composed, graceful, and silent throughout it all. The situation almost feels designed to test patience because it combines personal history, non-stop public scrutiny, and details many people would desperately prefer to keep away from headlines.
But in your mind, a great guest.
No, a great guest because he would say anything that came into his mind. He was completely unfiltered. He was talking about his daughter was the most attractive woman he ever met and how much he thought she was hot.
The fact that these moments are now being replayed, analyzed, and spread across countless platforms creates a strange sense of inevitability, almost as though the past has decided it is not done resurfacing. Stern's own perspective on Trump has evolved as well, adding another layer to the story. He has spoken about Trump not just as a former guest, but as someone whose political motivations he openly questioned. According to Stern, Trump's move into politics was driven less by public service and more by a desire for influence, attention, and opportunity. That interpretation reshapes the entire narrative into something that feels less like a traditional rise to power and more like the expansion of a carefully built personal brand. The idea that a presidential campaign may have started partly as a publicity strategy is already difficult for many people to process. But when those ideas are paired with resurfaced clips filled with casual and highly personal discussions, the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. On one side stands the polished image of leadership, while on the other sits a collection of moments that feel shockingly candid.
Now, Stern and Trump, not as close as they used to be.
The turning point in my relationship with Donald was he did ask me to speak at the convention, and I had to say no. And,
Were you tempted at all?
Well, since I was a Hillary supporter, for a minute I thought, well, I'll go up and endorse Hillary.
Melania's position in this entire situation becomes even more complicated because she is not only facing the return of old interviews, but also the way those interviews portray her relationship. Stern frequently questioned why Trump remained committed to her despite having endless access to other women, a line of discussion that sounded less like curiosity and more like deliberate provocation. Even the implication behind those questions is enough to create tension because it turns a marriage into a topic for public speculation instead of a private connection. As these clips continue gaining attention online, the reactions themselves become part of the story. It is no longer just about what was originally said, but how audiences are responding to it today. The internet has a powerful way of reviving old conversations and transforming them into brand new controversies. Combined with Stern's interview style and Trump's willingness to engage, it creates the perfect storm of viral content that refuses to disappear quietly. What makes the entire situation even more fascinating is the contrast between Trump's past and present personas. The version of Trump who appeared on Stern's show thrived on controversy, embraced attention, and treated shock value almost like entertainment currency.
Ow. We're going to turn to Georgia's interview with radio legend Howard Stern. We hear it's very candid.
It is candid. Howard talks about everything and anything. As you know, he has no filter, but this book is still full of surprises, a lot of self-reflection from Howard.
I don't have the courage to play.
But your prenup, is it going to be like Britney Spears? She gets $300,000 a year for every year that she's with you, or is it going to be less?
We're going to have a prenup. You have to have a prenup.
Have you started working on it
I've written
yet?
too many books, Robin, about prenups not to have one. I said
you have to.
No, I have men that are destroyed. I have friends that are very smart, killer.
The Trump who later entered the presidency faced an entirely different level of scrutiny, where every statement carried consequences and every action was carefully examined. The collision between those two versions of the same person creates a narrative that feels nearly impossible to fully reconcile. Stern himself has never avoided acknowledging the role he played in shaping those moments. He described Trump as someone constantly willing to go further than expected, which made for unforgettable radio, but also laid the groundwork for complications years later. The fact that these interviews are now being revisited through a far more critical lens adds another layer of drama nobody could have fully predicted. Melania's response, whether publicly expressed or interpreted through media coverage, becomes a major focal point because it reminds people there is a human side to a story otherwise dominated by spectacle. It is easy to get distracted by the humor, irony, and absurdity surrounding the controversy, but beneath it all is a real person navigating an intensely public challenge.
Every time in the book, you'll read about he gets into an argument with the Daily News gossip columnist A.J. Benson. They're fighting over a woman that they both had sex with on the air. I mean, it's...
The irony behind the entire situation feels almost unbelievable, because the very qualities that once made Trump such an entertaining guest on Stern's show are now the same traits creating tension in his public role. His willingness to say virtually anything, his disregard for boundaries, and his embrace of controversy all contribute to a narrative that is both captivating and deeply complicated. As the clips continue spreading online, the story keeps evolving with every reaction, every discussion, and every reinterpretation. It gradually becomes less about one specific interview and more about the larger reality of living in a time where nothing truly disappears forever. The entire situation feels like a collision between entertainment culture and political reality, where the boundaries between the two have become increasingly blurred. The mix of humor, controversy, unpredictability, and spectacle ensures this is not a story that fades quietly, because every resurfaced clip adds another layer to an already complicated picture.
You can get in there, and I think Donald would have appointed me.
Because he's transactional, or I
think he would have been grateful that I'm on his team.
And as attention remains locked onto this unfolding drama, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. When the past decides to return, it does not ask for permission, it does not soften its impact, and it certainly does not arrive quietly, especially when it involves personalities who built their reputations around being bold and unapologetic. As the old clips continue circulating online, another layer of intrigue emerges, because this is no longer just about the original comments, but about how intentionally they are being revisited in a completely different era of public scrutiny. What once survived on shock value alone is now examined under a microscope, demanding accountability, reflection, and context, transforming casual remarks into headline material that refuses to disappear. Stern's role in all of this becomes even more fascinating when viewed through the evolution of modern media itself. The environment that once rewarded outrageous honesty now exists alongside audiences that analyze every detail with incredible precision. Conversations that once felt like edgy entertainment now seem like artifacts from a period when consequences felt distant rather than immediate.
You to speak at the RNC, I think I had no idea about that.
He used to call me from the campaign trail, and I think he was really desirous of my endorsement. because A, I have a big audience, and B, he's familiar with that audience, and I think it would have been very comforting to him.
For Melania, the situation evolves into something that feels far more exhausting than a temporary controversy, because every resurfaced clip brings another wave of attention and renewed public discussion. The fact that deeply personal parts of her life were once discussed so openly creates an undeniable sense of discomfort, especially when those conversations invite speculation instead of understanding. At the same time, there is an unmistakable level of spectacle surrounding the story that continues drawing audiences in, because the contrast between past behavior and present expectations feels almost too dramatic to believe. It becomes a larger story about transformation, image, and the unpredictable way history can suddenly return when least expected. What makes it even more compelling is realizing this is not just one isolated incident, but part of a broader pattern where public figures are constantly re-examined through the lens of their past. Every clip, every reaction, and every interpretation adds another piece to a narrative that never quite feels complete, ensuring the conversation continues evolving long after the original interviews first aired. In the end, the entire episode serves as a reminder that reinvention has limits when the past remains impossible to erase.